Welcome, everyone, to the launch of Articulate with Kessler West, an exciting new development of luxury townhomes in North Oak Cliff. I'm here today with Matt Hawley, the developer of Kessler West, a new residential project inspired by art, nature, and urban energy. His initial development in the area is the AIA-recognized Kessler Woods, which has been called the gold standard of residential real estate in North Oak Cliff by both the local press and the New York Times. Matt, please say a few words about the collaboration and what inspired the first segment of the Articulate series.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Terry, and for hosting this virtual event. I'm just really happy to be collaborating with you to highlight the role that art really does play in enriching our lives. This has certainly been made clear over the past years. We've all spent a lot more time in our homes than perhaps we normally would. Art not only helps to create beauty and highlights our own creativity and uniqueness, but certainly helps to form a true sanctuary. We can find peace in the midst of life that obviously becomes chaotic at times. And just as you and your team at Patron promote the arts in its many forms within North Texas and beyond, we at Ground Floor are inspired by beautiful things and every day endeavor to create spaces in the built realm that are beautiful in and of themselves, but also serve as a canvas, so to speak, for the homeowner to create an environment of beauty that reflects who they are. We spent a great deal of time planning Kessler West to be a lovely integration of art, architecture, nature, and community. These four ideas make up what we refer to as our four pillars of the project, and they really do serve as touchstones that guide our work. So this first segment in the Articulate series is art, which is the first of these pillars. Since art is the focus of this segment, it would be no surprise to anyone in the art community in Dallas to see Kenneth Craighead of Craighead Green Gallery speaking to this topic, because he's one of the most respected and well-known gallery owners and art experts in Texas. But not only that, both he and Terri have been dear friends for over 10 years. And in fact, Kenneth and I go back close to 20, I believe. They're both consummate professionals with deep knowledge of the subject, but also, I feel live their lives with kindness and integrity and really disarming humility. So working on this series has been a great deal of fun, as it has allowed, long-term friends to get to work on a shared passion. I'd like to take a moment just to introduce my colleague, Vinny Deegan, who is coordinating this and many other aspects of the West Kessler marketing program. Vinny, would you say hello, please?
Well, hello, Terry and Kenneth. It's so good to see you. Mark, Pam, thank you for being part of this. I go back with these guys. We're like the three musketeers. Well, I'm the fourth one, and have been working with them since, a couple of years now. So thank you, and I'm excited for what we have in store. Thanks, Matt.
Great, thanks, Vinny. So before turning this over to Kenneth, I do want to mention that if you go to the Kessler West website and look at both the rendered images as well as the virtual tour of the different unit types, you'll see art on the virtual walls. Kenneth actually curated real art from among his collection at the gallery for the interiors of these units. He spent a great deal of time, put a lot of thought and energy into the installation. And as a result, we've had really rave reviews from across the spectrum of viewers, including prospective buyers, art collectors, and creative professionals. So, Kenneth, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. So let me not take up any more time and turn this over to my dear friend, Kenneth.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the kind words. We are the gallery, Craighead Green Gallery in the Design District. Myself, along with Alex Rivera, we're getting ready to have an opening, or a Saturday from 11 to 5 presentation of new work from Peter Borrega, Jack Hammock, and Mark Smith. We're very excited about it. This will be the second show exhibition that we presented during these different times that we're living. And we welcome people to come and see it. It's been an effort, but it's been a lot of fun. First, I really appreciate what Matt and Vinny and Terri and all my friends do concerning the arts, because it's so important to us, to me personally, and to us as a community. And just to build homes and to sell them is one thing, to build and sell a lifestyle is another, and that's why we, I think, partner so well together, and I really do appreciate, again, your efforts. To start with, Peter Borrega is an artist that's living in California. He is obviously paints abstract. He refers to them as his landscapes, and they're moody. They're most of the work is done with palette. To me, they're very daydreamy. They're peaceful. Some of them take on a little bit more of a serious note. He says landscapes, but I can also see a seascape, and that's what art is about. It's about what you see, and that's what I see, and that's my appreciation for his work. We also have Jack Hammock, and Jack is, many of you probably know Jack because for years and years he lived across the street from Kessler Woods, and now he lives almost full time in North Carolina. We have the Roadrunner here. There's many more paintings, but all of this is taken from nature. He's up in the mountains. He is living in sheer heaven. That guy he is all about nature, animals, and he has painted a whole collection that you'll see in a minute that represents his lifestyle there. And I think that just the joy and happiness that goes along with these little creatures, for myself, really make me smile and make me feel good about my life. And then last but not least, we have Mark Smith. We're obviously very proud to have all three. We're very proud to have Mark. He's been with us for an unbelievable 14 years. Time flies. And all of us have had a very special relationship with Mark for those 14 years. I knew him before that when he was with Sidney Patrick Gallery, which was Edith Baker Gallery. And we were thrilled that he would come and join us at that time. And so here we are, 14 years later. His work has developed, it's changed, it's evolved as all artists typically do. His work is geometric, but there's a different sense about each one. To me, again, it's all personal opinion, but they're just exquisite. They're the texture, the colors, the detail, how he's able to get the transparency that he does with his work is fascinating. And he lives and breathes art like most of our artists. He has taught for years up at Austin College, and I thank him for that because he's passing on some pretty good knowledge and awareness that he has of the arts to many students that walk through the halls of that place. So thank you for that. And so we're really pleased that Mark took the time to join us, and he's going to let us into his own studio. And hopefully we can get him to talk about some of the work that's there. There's some sculpture pieces, I think, and the current work that's hanging on our wall. I'm really looking forward to it. And also we have this afternoon, we have Pamela Nelson that is going to ask some questions and comment along with the rest of us. So stick with us, and we're going to turn this over to Mark and let him run with it.
Great.
Hey, folks. Well, thank you, Kenneth, and everyone. And I'm so thrilled to be here. And what a great occasion and great reason for being together and sharing our love and passion for art and architecture and culture. And everybody is still alive and well, and creativity, I think, has flourished despite all the adversity. And I would like to just invite you to come with me, and I'm going to take you through the front door, and we'll walk through the house, and we'll go down the hill and look at the studio. So let's just walk up. So, oh, there I am. That you couldn't see my face. I'm standing in front of some work, just so you know who I am. And I've been a painter for a long time. I was telling my students recently that I've painted over half a century, and I think that is actually true. And it's always exciting, never been more exciting. And this is where I live, in a house in Argyle, Texas, that I designed and built expressly because it is a place for exhibiting art, and I have 2 studios attached to the property. So it's a hilltop that actually I can see downtown Dallas and walk up through the breezeway into the house. And this is basically a big open format. It's a steel substructure, walls with plywood. So my art is in the house. I have sculpture and painting, and we have lots of good natural light, which in this particular case, in the late afternoon, the sun is coming through and striking one of my sculptural pieces. And I'll tell you about those later. And looking back, and so it's a house that was built slowly, and it was an act of love and pleasure, and I've enjoyed it now for almost 30 years. So we'll go through the house, and oh, here's a piece along the way. And this is the back porch, and down in the distance on the left, you'll see my studio. So let's just go around the corner, walk down, and this is my humble abode, and now we are inside. Well, one of the greatest things about having space, I think Picasso said space was more important than money, but the idea of having this place where I can go, and it is my universe, and I get to make gadgets and paint paintings, and my process of working is a little bit different, and every artist has their own unique way of approaching creativity and problem solving and producing art, which can be very, very intense and a lot of discipline. But what I've done is I try to make it as comfortable as possible. And what I tend to do is work on multiple paintings at one time. The methodology that I use, I always have envied journalists who are given assignments, and their assignment is to find out everything about a subject and be immersed in a subject and then write a piece. Well, I think that was my attitude as an artist. I was more interested actually in the outside world than art, looking at art. I found myself deeply involved with the process of research. So every 2 years or so, I undertake a new research theme, which I then, at the end of that period, convert into a series of digital drawings, which we'll talk about. Pretty complex process. I even have some proprietary software. And I take my digital drawings and I select through them. In this particular case, I was looking at the art of Islam, and I was also listening to music from the Middle East. So I was sort of in tune with the music and looking at the pattern. And I then decide what piece out of this group of typically 200 or 300 digital drawings that I use, I'll select a handful, and I begin to paint the paintings from the research and the digital images. And this is an example of one of the research pieces that I did. This is actually a piece that I did not paint, but typically I'll lay out the ideas, I'll get my studio set up, and then I start mixing hundreds of custom colors because the colors I want to use have to be manufactured. They're really not readily available. So typically I work on large or small formats, and sometimes I like the idea of combining a lot of small elements to create something resembling a flock of birds or a gander of geese. And I love the idea of the multiples of something that's beautiful that creates a larger whole. And I literally will make walls full of these images. And this is one actually I did for MD Anderson. So I'm a researcher, I'm a geeky scientist, I'm an artist, and I was raised by 2 people that encouraged me from childhood. I lived in a mid-century house surrounded by abstract expressionist paintings from local university professors, and I absolutely bonded and fell in love with abstract painting way, way back when. Occasionally I'll do murals for clients, and I love to work with architects and engineers. This was a collaboration with Cunningham Architects. This is Corky Cunningham, and I worked on this project. It's for a client in South Texas, just outside of Austin in Wimberley. And what I did is I went to the client's home and I drove from Austin to his house. It's about a 15-mile journey, and took dozens and dozens of pictures of this journey, the transition from the city into the countryside. And that became the idea for the piece. It's the journey, it's the transition, it's arriving at a new place and having a vista. So I created a concept for a mural, and I then decided that I had to paint them in this strange format because the panels were so heavy, I couldn't move them. So here I am working on a mural sideways and projecting the images and trying to get all the lines to line up so that when the mural is assembled, it will be in sync. So this is a process, and I'm mixing my colors, and these are the little quadrants that I'm working with. The images are reflective of what the panel will look like. And here's my crew. We're kind of lining it up, and periodically we'll put it together and see if the parts are matching, and hopefully they are. And again, the alignment and the logistics were complex. Up there, yep, it's working. It looks like it's going to work. It looks like it worked. And so we got to take it down, install it in the house in the hills. And the really great part of being an artist is you get to interact with other people in projects, whether it's a residential process or client, whether it's a commercial client. But this was one of the most exciting things I ever got to do. And it's a beautiful, beautiful home. And the spiral staircase was spectacular. And also I kind of maybe predicted that in my painting, because I think I felt that. And it ends up that the painting became, this was my idea, a way to hide a lot of high technology. This is a house full of technology. So we converted this into a functional mural that actually had a utilitarian idea behind it. And what I work on, generally speaking, is multiples of things. I love to work on paper. So I'd like to show you what's at the gallery at Craighead Green. And this is the work I've been doing. COVID brought on so many artists, forced them into a place that maybe they didn't anticipate. And I talked to other artists, but something really unusual happened to me. I was raised by my paternal grandmother, and she was a seamstress, and she made absolutely exquisitely beautiful garments, but primarily she made costumes for dancers. And her studio was in South Texas, and it was very airy, and it was a courtyard, sort of Spanish style courtyard house. And outside were marigolds and plants, but inside of her studio, from one side to the other, were thousands of spools of colored thread and old industrial Singer sewing machines that were constantly churning and humming and moving and spewing out these beautiful rivers of color and thread. And when COVID first forced us into isolation, I felt the force and the presence of my grandmother and that memory of that time and space. And all of these paintings are really my way of paying homage to her. Her name was Wilhelmina Gore Smith, and we called her Miss Willie. And she took me as a little 5-year-old kid and gave me a spool of thread and sat me in front of a big Singer sewing machine, gave me a piece of black felt and said, "See what it feels like." And I've learned to draw with that sewing machine and the thread. So this is really, this piece is, I hear the machines, I feel the thread, they hum, they're beautiful, they sing. And so this is my homage to Miss Willie.
And what is that painting called, Mark?
This one is called Sunflowers, because that was one of the things she had in the courtyard, big, beautiful sunflowers. And the way I paint is different than than some painters. I like to paint on wood. And as a sculptor, somebody who made polychrome wooden sculptures, I learned that oil paint is absorbed into wood in a very beautiful way. So what I've done is I've translated that sculptural experience into painting, and I paint in very, very thin layers of paint, and I have stainless steel and Teflon blades that I've made myself, and I gently trowel the paint over the wood. I let it dry, and then I put a layer of paint over a layer of paint over a layer of paint. And the consequence is the paintings, since they're not opaque, the color is passing through the painting and bouncing back off the light white surface, trying to achieve luminosity. And that's really part of the experience of her beautiful courtyard. And these are large paintings. They're about 63 inches by 48 inches, and they're made on Russian birch with maple substrata. So they're cross-braced.
Is the natural color of the wood more of an orange, or is it more of a yellow?
Pam, the wood is pale yellow, but I put plaster of Paris and gesso on it. Mm-hmm. And I trowel it on and get a really thin layer of this reflective white material, and then I gently sand it. And the problem with painting on wood is you don't want to fill the grain of the wood. The wood is so beautiful, and it has magnificent little microfibers. Mm-hmm. And so really the paint that I'm working with does not have any binder in it. It's about the closest equivalent of pure paint with just a drop of something to make it wet, almost like tempera.
So you're using powder, or you're using pigment powder, and getting those thin veils with just a little bit of medium.
It's actually about 70, you certainly will know the chemistry of this, about 70% pigment to whatever the remainder of binder. So the typical ratio is about 43 pigment to binder. So this is about 73 pigment to binder. So it's pretty intense.
Well, you build these structures too, don't you, Mark?
I do. Since I came from the background of being a sculptor, yeah. Yes, and they're engineered and they're lightweight. And one thing I wanted to show you in my studio is that I finally had to solve a problem, which is how do you handle large, heavy objects? And I have a clever solution. I'll tell you about that.
Wow. When I was looking at these and the precision where you fold around a corner and paint on the edges is breathtaking.
Oh.
I have some pictures of your edges.
Well, I wish I did. Yeah, that's right. The boxes are rather thick, and so the one thing I like about the stout box is that it is an object. It's like a sculptural object. So I literally paint the painting as if it's wrapping around the edge. And thank you, Pam. That means a lot that you saw that. But
Mark, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
This is Matt. First of all, these are beautiful. I always react to art by how I feel drawn into it or not. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'm just really drawn into this. They feel very deep and almost moving to me. I love the color palette, really beautiful. I was curious, you mentioned that you do almost three-dimensional art at times, as you kind of paint around corners. Have you ever actually created furniture or larger objects out of wood material that you painted in their entirety?
I will show you. Thank you for asking. Yes, indeed. I sure did. Years ago, I traveled to Greece and Turkey, and I learned from a master about how to construct polychrome wooden forms. So I actually sort of made that an object of my study. So I'll show you just in 1 second. So here we are. Now, the other thing too is, and I've got to say this, being raised in a mid-century house, because my parents were, my friends would call that the Jetson house, because they weren't quite sure about this mid-century house. But that was what I knew. That was the norm. And of course, there was a lot of light and there was wall space, and it just seemed like the outside came in and the inside went out. And we had, beautiful mid-century furniture to go with it. And I thought, well, I've got to remember this. And so as an older artist, I cannot begin to tell you how important architecture is to me, just as a human being, but really as an artist. It's probably my first true love. And I'll show you in a minute some of my, and I have designed, I've designed 2 houses, the one I'm living in. But, and occasionally I'll venture into landscape. Now this is not the new work, but I want to also tell you that as a self-assignment, we talked about earlier, that every artist sort of has the right, and they get to exercise that prerogative, that they can do things that are thematically challenging and diverse and different. And I've always leaned a little bit towards architecture and landscape and music. Those are the 3 pyramids of my art. And space and depth. My father is from New Mexico, but let me get to, so these are the New Mexican inspired ones.
Is quite similar to New Mexico.
It is, yes. I'm so glad you said that, because that was what I really, really wanted to do.
Like you're going back in time in your life. These feel like there's so many layers that they're going back in time, and you're taking from different ages of yourself and putting it into the different glazes and layers,
Hey, Pam, I just finished a biography of Tom Stoppard, and what you're saying, it seems to be really the essence of what so many artists, if you get to be that certain special age, is that yes, indeed, it's this wonderful reflection, and suddenly the notion of time is really sort of an abstraction. We are in the present, we're in the past, and we're in the future almost simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a sort of person that, and this is an installation at Craig K. Green. This is such, by the way, guys, this is such a beautiful show. And this is what I do. These are my 3-dimensional pieces. This is very, very large. This is a massive piece. I learned how to stave barrels, and the house that I designed, the model for the house is actually this piece. I took it apart and reconstructed it. It's about 8.5 feet tall, and I take solid pieces of poplar wood and I mill them and I steam them like Eames furniture, and I bolt them together with titanium bolts, little bitty tiny titanium bolts, and then I paint them with thin washes of oil paint. And the staving of the barrel is made out of veneer, birch veneer that I actually veneered to 1/16 of an inch. So they're super tight tolerances. And these pieces were done as a reflection on what I'd just been reading about why doesn't contemporary architecture more often look at everything around it and absorb the environment and become at one with that. And so the new and the old are sort of, there's a dialogue between periods and stages of architecture. So I was thinking about Italian cities and American cities and wishing that maybe someday we'll have a nicer dialogue between then and now. And that, of course, would be the future. So these are very big, very complex, very heavy. And I was very fortunate to have these exhibited at the Kimball a while back, and this piece was in the Kimball, and it was had a little rope around it so people wouldn't get too close. And this little boy in one of the audiences sort of looked around and ran over to the piece and took out of his backpack a little toy character and walked up and put it on the stairs and ran back. And I thought that's got to be the greatest form of a compliment. Nothing could be better, right? So,
what year were these, Mark? What year were
those were thank you, Pam. That was like way long ago. I'm not sure. I'm gonna say 94, something like that.
I thought they were in the 90s.
Yeah.
You and I have exhibited together for many years at Edith Baker and then now Craig.
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting because when I see these, I don't actually remember making them because they're so labor intensive. But I did have an exhibition with the architect Charles Moore.
Uh-huh.
And he walked up and he kind of got close and he said, "Have you been looking at my work?" And at the time, I've got to say, I actually didn't know his work.
Oh.
But I thought, wow, this is
on the same wavelength.
Yeah. So I have a lot of these big pieces. They are big, they're massive, and they're and this was, of course, the consummate expression of the weighing, the balance of the present and the past, and that fulcrum at the top. So painting, sculpture, architecture, life, people, it's all just so beautifully connected. And I think that's why I'm so happy that my parents encouraged me and I got to be an artist, and I love it, still do. And I hope I have an exhibition, but a photograph of an exhibition I had in New Orleans 2 months before Katrina. And all of the pieces were in the gallery, and every piece that I had made was on stilts like a barge. And it was so strange that shortly thereafter the gallery flooded. But and that is it. And you all, thank you so much for inviting me. I just love to get to share, and it just makes me very, very happy. I appreciate it.
Mark, I have a question for you. How has the art scene and the art collecting changed since you were at Edith Baker, which, had closed, 15 years ago now? And now you're with Kenneth. What do you see? Do you see people embracing contemporary art much more? Did it used to be harder to sell abstract work?
That's a really, really good question. I think the short answer is probably, and this may just be from the artist's perspective, probably not necessarily from, I think Kenneth might have another notion, but to me, Dallas is a very positive city to be as an artist. There's so much support quietly sometimes in the background that people love and look and spend time. I have not seen any disruption of that supportive network, but I know that it's a question that younger artists especially really want to have this discussion. And I do believe, and I hope, that there will be a greater level of mentorship on the part of artists at my stage in my career and younger artists, because I think that I don't want to use the word networking, I want to call it mentorship, that there is so much that we generationally can learn from each other. And my hope for galleries would be that they would embrace that notion of mentorship and even perhaps curate shows that support and celebrate that idea of traditions that are shared and change and evolve and grow. So my optimism is as great as it's ever been, but that's my real hope.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much.
Yeah, and Mark, thank you so much for also giving us a tour of your home. I'm not an architect by training, but I'm sort of a frustrated architect. And perhaps more than anything, architects that work with me get frustrated with me because I want to get involved in all the details, and I love it so much. But your home feels so much of like an extension of you and your artistic. It's an artistic outlet. I'm just curious, what was it, the mid-century, your upbringing in mid-century homes that became sort of the inspiration for that style, or is it more hill country? And then, it seemed like it was designed really to showcase your art too. So there were certain elements that when you think about design that your home, that was important for you when you designed it to kind of bring all of this together for you.
Absolutely. And at that time, of course, I was making very, very large objects. Like this is 13 feet in height. I was making very large objects. And so that was an underlying idea. And, mid-century homes, well, in the mid-century, they weren't really as big as you might imagine these days. 1,500 square foot home would be a nice sized house. So I really, really wanted to build a house that would be a place for my art, a place of light. And of course, I've got 2 inches of plywood over 2x8s. So you can screw things and hang things with impunity. And the other thing that occurred to me is that stylistically, I think it evolved because most of the building materials were recycled. 80% of the materials that I used were recycled. So there was an abandoned stone pit. That's where that warm limestone came from. The flooring came from a basketball stadium in Wichita Falls. So the metal roof came from a Ford dealership. So I was kind of a little bit ahead of the curve in that regard. So I think, here's my friend Corky Corky Cunningham says that, all good architecture dates itself because that's what it's supposed to do. But I also think that the best architecture is genuinely timeless. I mean, truly timeless.
Now, do you still make large scale sculpture?
No,
Fabulous. I feel like you should still be making them.
No, you know what? Thank you so much. I don't do that because it was dangerous. Very tight tolerances, very powerful machines, and I just looked up one day and said, "Nope, time to stop." Painting.
Mark, I'm so sorry.
Thank you for showing these to us because they're just really extraordinary.
They're really inspiring. I would like to see some of the work on paper too, because I've only seen your work on wood for so many years. But I guess a lot of things are happening digitally instead of on a piece of paper now when you're planning a painting.
Well, I draw all the time, and my drawings are blueprints, and I call them blueprints for things that will never be built. And interestingly enough, in Russia, in the worst part of the post-Glasnost Russian culture, 92 forward, architects couldn't get work, and so they drew furiously. Beautiful. And look, sometime you can look at paper architecture is the title of the movement and the practitioners. Incredibly beautiful work, and I do architectural drawings to this day. Almost every day I work on them, things that will never be built.
I'd love to see those. I think you're just so good at collaborating with architects, but I really think you're probably an architect yourself, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. It was a true pleasure.
Mark and Pam, hi, this is Vinny jumping in. I have a question for you both, because the amount of years you have spent in the art worlds and shows that you've done, we all have to start somewhere. Somehow. Mark, you were born into the 1950s Jetson house, like his dog Elroy. Pam, where did you start? Did you have that calling from the higher heavens, or?
I actually have to hand it to my grandmother too. My grandmother would keep me at her home in South Texas every summer. It's South Texas, and she had a button collection, huge button collection, jars of red buttons and mother of pearl buttons, and I would make mosaics on the floor. And she worked with her hands a lot, and I just watched her hands, and she was so encouraging, and she would give me materials, and I owe it to her for my love of making things and kind of cross-pollinating the high arts with the crafts and all that. So we owe a lot. Now I'm a grandmother, and I think, my gosh, I really hope I have some influence on my grandchildren. Like I owe my whole life's career to her.
Oh,
That's
you're
so
gonna
good.
make me tear up. Oh my
That's-
gosh, I'm such a lightweight. Oh my gosh.
Pam, I'm not at all surprised to hear that. It's just your work is just glorious. That's all I can say. It's just glorious.
She I mean, had huge influence, just like your grandmother, you know. So here we are. We're the elders now.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear what advice, Mark, you teach. So I'd be curious to hear what you tell your young artists to be prepared for.
Well, thank you for that. That's
Probably a whole college course. But
no. It actually, you know what? It actually isn't. I've been at Austin College so long that they actually created a title for me, which is, probably in code that means, wow, you've been here for a long time. but I'm the chair of the arts, and I did not graduate from high school, and I was not much of an achiever kid. I sort of wanted to do my thing, and I painted the mural when I was 11, and so I never went to high school and never imagined that I would be a college professor. But lo and behold, I ended up, Boston University and City University in New York, and became a professor, and my parents were just pretty much flabbergasted. And my students, I do want to say this because it's very important to say, my students right now are largely not art majors. They're medicine, science, engineering, education, business. This generation of young students that I have, they are absolutely remarkable people. They have strength and daring creativity and integrity and spirit, and they're connected. I am so optimistic about the future because I know these people from my job, and what they do creatively is always an expression of who they are, what they're feeling, what's happening in the world around them. They're very in tune. I just tell them that studying art is preparation for and practicing for the rest of your life, because your life is a work of art. It's a work in progress, and learning to do creative problem solving is precisely what we do. Genetically, we are amazing and we are inherently creative. And I encourage them that you don't have to even make a living as an artist. Art becomes a part of your inner core. And so I just encourage them. I'm absolutely believe that there's some element of artistry and creativity in everybody, but it sometimes takes someone to encourage that and help bring it out. So I call myself a guide, not a teacher.
That's what Montessori teachers are called, guides. Right?
Well, then there you go. But anyway, that's a really good question, Terry. That's.
Well, I think it's easy to get lost, and I think young people seek that kind of mentorship to feel safe about what they're doing or the challenges they're taking on.
They do, and the controversy of teaching remotely. I teach all my classes via Zoom. The work that my students create is the best work of any group of students I've seen in 45 years of being a professor. So
Wow.
it's because they are so eager to be able to be creative because they want it, they need it. So it's real, it's important. So
That's really interesting. Have you worked more during the lockdown than you've ever worked in your life?
yes.
Me too.
Yeah, pretty much. But I work. I mean, I get up and breathe, and I just, you know, that's just part of who I am. But yes, I have. I've worked a lot.
Yeah.
I know you have, Pam, because I see your work.
It's embarrassing how much I've worked.
Well, you know what? Yes, and I have friends, and I have non-artist friends who say things like, "God, it must be just the greatest thing in the world." I say, well, it is, but it's also work. And also it would be utterly depressing to have to rent a storage building for all the work that I make. So
there's no distractions. We're all we can do is just focus. And so that's been a interesting thing to see.
And Pam, I know from having known you for all these years, and you have this experience, I'm sure, that sometimes I will see a color or I will see an element, something out in the world, and I will think of maybe 30 years ago, I was working on a piece, the memory that is built by making a physical object. I feel like I have created this. I have a reference for every time, every period in my life. For all these years, I know where I was, how I was feeling, what I was thinking, the emotion, the stress, the drama, the joy. It is like the sentiment behind each physical thing is just so, it resonates. I never quite understood that until fairly.
I think color is almost like music. It goes straight to your heart, and it's the most emotional I noticed that your color palette for the show currently is pretty harmonious. It's you're kind of in the complementary blue oranges, but I mean, and then I just love those loopy bobbins or
that's what they are, bobbins
or whatever. I mean, that organic part is just a great difference from the this crispness of the geometry. So I think it's a very successful show, Mark. And,
thank you. That means the world.
Pam was very, very good to you.
Mark and Pam, I have a question. This is Matt. You both of your work is, beautiful, sophisticated, technical. It looks technical and difficult to somebody like myself who's not really an artist, hasn't practiced that. But I'm just curious, Mark, you're talking about your students, and I assume they're college age, younger students. But how would you advise older students, older would-be students, people that, again, we go through periods like we've just been going through over the last year, and you want to look for something to find solace in. And while none of us will likely achieve the expertise that you both have, would you have any advice for people that may want to start later in life and find ways to express feelings and thoughts and collect memories essentially through some practice of art that would be a reasonable way to start when you're later in life?
Well, I know Pam has strong feelings, and my big takeaway from having had the experiences that I've had is that the number one important factor that people have to be really coached and reminded is that we are genetically predisposed. We are made to be creative. We have this neural network, this magnificent hard drive, bigger than any AI invention that's ever been invented. We are magnificent creators. It just takes somebody to articulate, encourage, point it out, and it also takes somebody to at least break it down into manageable segments, take small bites at a time. Again, one of my dreams is mentorship between generations of artists. Another one of my dreams is that we would encourage people and find a way in a society to let people have sabbaticals from their other part of their life, to encourage people from all walks of life. I would very easily, I would in a heartbeat, would love to be a teacher, coach, guide for older students as well. I mean, and so that's one of the things I'm going to do if I stop teaching at Austin College. That's going to be high on my priority list, to reach out. And this would be a nonprofit. This is about humanness. This is something that and again, if you think of England after the Second World War, and if you look at the way England took all of these artists whose lives had been disrupted and all of the artists who'd never got to start, they were putting art in hospitals, and they were teaching and coaching and educating people from all walks of life. So possibly, I think the future will be, there will be more specific opportunities for that age group. But Matt, that's a really, really good question.
I think a lot of more mature people, after they want to explore that side of themselves. And so I do think that it's reversible. Everything can be changed, thrown away. Don't have to be precious. You just have to have a risk and try something. And I've had older students, and I always start with collage, because it's just, you can move things around, you can cut them out, and they don't feel as precious as each brush stroke sometimes. And but I just think I think at any age, it's a wonderful thing to feel the freedom of starting something didn't exist until you made it,
Exactly.
Yeah, you made it with your hands.
Mm-hmm.
Sign me up.
I'm here. I'm available.
Are either of you teaching classes at the Creative Arts Center?
No. But we need to, we need to find a way to make this happen. That would be my wish, to find a way to do things with art that would help other people, enable them to be creative and have this experience too, because it's really wonderful. So
Yes, it changes you.
It does.
And that's sort of part of what I think this sort of series is about, that that we kind of put together here, is the notion that art in all of its varied forms really does enrich our life. And so many of us unfortunately don't participate other than maybe collecting it, which is art. It is a form of being artistic in and of itself. It's creativity, right? Assembling art that you love and respond to. And so as a developer, I think about, just like Mark with your home, think about how can you showcase your art? You have places that art can be presented in a way that speaks to you and says something about you, even when people are visiting, and it can change, it can evolve. And, the same thing with the landscape and the, nature and your interaction, with the community at large. And there's so many ways for art to enrich our lives, visually and experientially and in relationships. And, I think that we're hoping that from this series and through this collaboration, we're inspiring people to not just think about their home, but in a broader sense, in a macro sense, how do you connect and link into art? And because we need it. We need beauty in our lives more now than perhaps ever. If the last year hasn't shown all of us that, I don't know what will. So, thank you both for being willing to share your experience and your art collections and your thoughts on this. It's been really, really interesting for me.
Yes, thank you. And the buttons.
Everyone.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you and Pam and everybody. And so nice to meet and reintroduce to all of you. It was a true pleasure. Thank you for including me.
No,
I want to add one thing to enhance what Matt was saying as well. And that is, I think what I love so much about what I do is learning about art and the artist. And Mark, I had no knowledge of your background and, you know, how these pieces came together. You know, just your sculpture I was not aware of. And I think it makes you appreciate art so much more when you meet the artist and you learn about their process and what inspires them. So I think this is very inspiring, and it was great to be with all of you.
Yes.
And
Same to you.